a way of acquiring property through force against native people or perhaps other European nations, right? And then third, we considered what you might call the rule of capture. We'll focus on more today. But the rule of capture can be done in different ways. Maybe one rule of capture means you have to actually physically put your hand around something completely. Other cases, you shoot it, you let it sink to the bottom of the ocean, it washes ashore. Or maybe you just chase it, and that's sufficient, right? There are different ways of satisfying the rule of capture. One approach we've discussed is labor theory, which is kind of capture, but really it's not, it's different, which says even if you don't physically put your hands on something, if you put sufficient labor into the process, you may state a claim to the animal. Okay? Everyone with me so far? Questions on those three doctrines? 3 or 4. You can put labor and capture together. I kind of separate them, so I would say 4. But if some people also combine them. All right, let me go through some of the questions. Okay, first question, equitable dominion. I think they mean unequivocal dominion. I'll get there in a bit. A bunch of people asked, do we need to know the notes after the case? Yeah, you do. If I assign it, you have to know it. I don't always have time to talk about everything in the book, otherwise we'd be here all day. But if it's assigned, it's totally fair game. Which one do I go to next? Thank you. Unequivocal dominion. Yeah. I see people ask the same question over and over again. I'll come back to it. Okay. Yeah, unequal division. Okay, so this is a question about the remedy. If you remember the baseball, the price was basically sliced in half. Judges do this kind of stuff sometimes, and I'll actually give you an example that's going on right now. Did anyone see in the news there's a house in Italy that's for sale in Rome? This is an ancient house in Rome. It's worth $500 million. That's all this very old art. I don't know art, but it's very expensive. And there was an inheritance fight. The husband died, the wife was stating a claim, and the children from a prior marriage were stating a claim. And they could not work out who got the house. So what did the court do? Put up for auction, and they split the proceeds. So this is actually a very common area in inheritance law, which you'll study later in your law school career. The Bolshevik Hayashis, I agree. Someone asked, oh yeah, I got a couple questions on custom. Usage and custom are pretty much the same thing, but I think usage suggests something a little bit more formal, right? A custom can be kind of informal, but a usage is something that's very formalized. And in divinity, the practice of calling ahead if you find a whale was kind of a usage, but there's not a strong difference. Okay, I think I got all the people repeat, so I didn't do all of them, but I think I have all the main ones. Anything else that's still on your mind? Is that a hand?
No.
Sorry, so I saw a wrist go up. All right, so then let's just try this first one. I want you all to take a stab. Let me put the polling on. Excuse me. Where is it here? Question number 1. Oops, sorry. Question. This thing does not want to work today. There it is. Question number 1. Define unequivocal dominion. Okay. Define unequivocal dominion. Okay, another 10 seconds or so. Okay. Who's next? Where are we up to? Brianna. Okay, very good. Okay, so Brianna, let's try it. How do you define the term unequivocal dominion?
It is absolute control or dominion over the item and control.
Okay, so I'm going to just stop you. Don't use the word to define it. So dominion in the thing, so don't use dominion definition. Try it again with that word dominion.
It's determining possession by having something within one's hands, like corporal.
Okay, oh, good. Okay, so you said corporal. What does corporal mean? Yes, that's actually a really good word. What?
Body.
Body. You see this in the Fox case, right? So let me just ask you one follow-up. You're actually on the right track. Do you have to have it in your hands to have unequivocal dominion?
Depends on who.
So you modify your definition? Okay, good. Okay, so Sophia, let me ask you, what's your definition? What'd you put?
I said that it was an undeniable right to exercise control over property.
Undeniable. Oh, that's interesting. What do you mean undeniable? Just spell that out for me, please.
So it's like your right to this property is uncontested. So it's not like you share it or that somebody can come and take it.
So someone can't come along and say, no, that's my baseball and that's my fox or duck. Okay, so Sophia, I'm sorry, Sophia focuses on, I'm getting back to you, but Sophia focuses on court, right? It can't be contested in court. Or Brianna, what would you put?
Clear control of possession.
Clear control of possession, okay. What do you mean by clear? It's a word people often use, but actually, not to criticize you, I try to use the word clear because it's usually not clear, it's usually not so clear, but just give me another word for clear. Obvious, okay. And I think that's similar to what Sophia said, it's not to make you challenged, right? Okay, good. All three, I think, are on the right track. There's not a single good definition of unequivocal dominion, which is why I think a lot of you asked me about this before, but I'll try and give you a few things to think about. One, there's not going to be disputes of fact, right? If you look at the circumstances in a court or wherever, it's like, okay, person A has a really good claim to it, person B's got nothing, right? It also has to do with corporal, right? Body. Did you lay hands on it? Is it in your physical possession? Or did you put a net over it, if it's a big thing? Or did you put your harpoon in it, right? Or did you attach your iron to it, right? When we're talking about this dominion, this unequivocal dominion, you have something that came from your body that is on the thing, right? With the baseball touched the top of Popov's glove. Remember that? That wasn't enough, right? He had a touch, but he didn't have control. I think you say control? I think you said control, right? Someone said control. He didn't have control over the ball, which is why it popped out and rolled around the floor, and then Hayashi bit someone and took the ball, right? All right. So everyone get that unequivocal dominion, right? There's not, students hate when I do this, but there's not a clear, one sentence definition. But I think all three of you gave me good things to think about. Anyone else put something maybe a little bit different that they want to add or they're thinking about? Here it is. I was using this bucket for the wipes to prop up my tripod and some put underneath. That's where it was. AV stuff. Got good angles. Hello, TV land. All right. We've actually had not that many people emailing to need COVID absences, so I'm actually pleasantly surprised. Our numbers in the school are actually pretty good. Look at the community. We're actually doing pretty good, the number of cases we have. So far, everyone stay safe. Just keep doing what you're doing. Okay. Any other questions on the Dominion? All right. Let's move on then to today's material. Kind of a weird class, right? It's like, what the hell? Why are we reading this thing about the cave? I promise you, or else I'll try to make it make sense. But there's a reason why I give this to the one else every year. All right. So Pearson v. Post is probably one of the most famous cases you'll study in law school, right? It's in the top 5, right? Everyone knows, Marbury versus Madison, maybe Erie, right? Maybe a few others, right? But Pearson v. Post is there. Every law student in the last, 100 years read this case. If they didn't, they were cheated. This is a case that arose in New York at the turn of the 19th century. All right? So I want to just ask a poll. This is not a right or wrong answer, just multiple choice. No. By the way, I think this is my other section. I had a true or false question, and someone put C. And I made points, what the hell? Why'd you put C? And then the person wrote in the poll, I didn't like either option, so I put C. I'm like, okay. So I guess something is either true or false. But this one is just an A or B. There's no C option. If you were a judge in New York in the 1800s and you were on this court, I want to just see which opinion would you have joined in Pearson? The majority opinion by Judge Tompkins or the dissenting opinion by Judge Livingston? Which one? Another 10 seconds or so. Okay, let's see what we got. Wow. That's pretty close, right? 53, 40, that's about as close as they'll get all semester, I think, with a class of 74 students. And I think the fact that I'm not making up, these numbers are close, suggests it's a hard case. And I think different people go with majority dissent for very different reasons. It's actually one of the closest ones I've had in the years. All right, so was that Ryder? All right, Ryder, start us off. What were the facts? What was the conflict we had between Pearson and Post, please? Good. Let me just stop you there. How do we know he was pursuing the fox all day? I know they said that, but how do we know he's not lying? Because people lie. All right, and I'll come back to you in a second, Ryder. Yeah, so I just want you just to keep this point in mind. I asked the same question again in last class. We have no idea how much he was actually hunting this fox, right? We have no idea. And for all we know, he was an incompetent hunter who spent 8 hours completely making a fool of himself and not knowing what the heck he was doing. Right? We just don't know, right? If you asked me to track a fox for 8 hours, I would spend 8 hours doing absolutely nothing, right? But I spent 8 hours doing it, right? By the way, Ryder, go back. So you have this guy. He's a hunter. He's running after this fox. What happens?
So as he was allegedly starting to get really close to being able to get actual possession of it, another hunter swoops.
Whoa. Was he, so who was who? Who was the first hunter?
I believe it's so Post is the one who was in pursuit of the fox.
Okay, Post was in pursuit, and then the other guy is Pearson. What is Pearson a hunter?
He's actually an armor.
Do we know? Yeah, it doesn't say he's a hunter. It just says he's someone else, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What does Pearson do?
So Pearson kills the fox or gets rid of the fox.
Mm-hmm.
And then Post, who was not pleased that he had lost the ability to have the fox, then brought suit against Pearson for I think it's just an actual trespass or conversion.
Okay, excellent. Very good. Thank you, Ryder. All right, so we have this conflict, right? Post is a hunter. He's hunting for some extended period of time. How long, we couldn't really say for sure, but he's hunting. And he spots a fox, and he's tracking it, and he's chasing it. Anyone ever go fox hunting? Is this something people do anywhere? I have no idea. Okay, whatever. So he's hunting a fox, and they actually make it onto a beach. This isn't in the case, but he tracks onto a beach in Long Island in New York. He gets closer and closer and closer, and then Pearson shows up. He didn't engage in the hunt, but Pearson swoops in and takes the fox. He kills the fox. Okay. Now, this case should have never happened, right? The value of the fox wasn't very much. We're talking only a few bucks, right? This is personal, right? You'll find in law, especially when you get into legal practice, most litigation should never go to the courts. People should just work stuff out on their own. But people take things very, how do you put it, personally, right? They feel that their integrity was attacked, right? That their reputation was attacked. And as a matter of honor, as a matter of principle, they want to fight back and stop the this intrusion upon their reputation as a hunter. So this goes to court, and it takes years. So you probably saw in the notes, which Remember, you have to read the notes, right? In the notes after the case, this case was just floating for years, which suggests there was some very bitter animosity between Pearson and Post. These guys hated each other. Think of Keeble and Hickringill from our last case, right? Think of Pop-Up and Hayashi. They hated each other because it was theirs and someone else took it from them. And so this went to court. All right. So then, Laura, what happened in the lower court here?
In the lower court, they ruled for Post,
Okay.
and then
Okay. So why didn't the lower court rule for Post?
the lower court, I believe it said that the lower court felt that because he had been pursuing it, that Pearson was a jerk. They called him sausage, and he jumped up out of nowhere and shot it.
Yeah. Okay. So very good. So the lower court rule for Post, right? The hunter. And Pearson appeals. Here we have the case where, again, the equities sort of factor in. I think he called him a jerk. I think that's a fair characterization. He was a jerk, right? He wasn't hunting it. He just swooped in at the last minute and killed the fox. So the lower court gave a victory for the hunter. Pearson appeals, and it goes to the Supreme Court of the state. So again, this is the highest court in the state of New York resolving what's basically a dispute between two hunters over a fox that's not worth very much money. $20, whatever the case was, it wasn't a lot of money. All right. So, Linda, let's start like this, right? You're the lawyer, right? You're the lawyer for Post, right? You're the lawyer for the hunter. What is your argument about why your client, the hunter, should get the fox? Just give me your best argument, please.
Because, I mean, he was pursuing it all day. I feel like he had the right, like, here he had his eye, his target on block, like, put in the effort, the labor.
But why is that enough, right? Why is putting in labor and effort sufficient if you have a fox to show for it?
Because it's kind of like the other case with the whale, kind of like you put in the effort and if someone finds it.
Right, but at least with the whale case, they fired a harpoon into the whale. They actually made some contact with the whale. Here, did Post make any contact whatsoever with the fox? Did he touch it? Did he shoot it? Did he throw an arrow at it or something? Did he throw a spear? I don't know. Did he throw anything at it?
No.
Okay, so Jackie, again, you're the lawyer for the hunter, right? What's your best argument for why the court should rule for the hunter here, Post?
Well, I'm with the opinion that it would deter business. It's
Okay.
a business to kill the foxes.
So it's a policy argument you're making, right? Lawsuits get policy arguments. You're making a policy argument.
Yeah.
Is fox hunting a business?
Well, it kills vermin, and that is positive for the community. So
Right. So, but if your goal is killing vermin, shouldn't we just let someone kill it quickly without these dogs and all this elaborate trapping? You know, why do we need to hunt the fox? You know, it's like you can just kill it.
that's a good point. In my opinion, I would have ruled for.
Yeah, no, I know you're rule. But I'm asking you, you're the lawyer for the hunter. Just stick with that for a minute, right?
Okay.
How do you respond to this argument you just gave?
That's a difficult question because I really don't support him.
Oh, well, look, this is a line of work where we got to take positions you don't like. And this is an easy case, take a position you don't agree with. We're talking foxes here. Okay, Tatiana? So again, you're the lawyer for the hunter, right? How do you respond to this argument that, you know, this is not a job. This is this aristocratic, you know, pursuit for wealthy people who want to just go up and spend all the hunting a fox when they could just, you know, kill it in 2 seconds. How do you respond to that argument?
I would say, I would kind of feel like the argument is completely against the effort that Pearson put in.
Oh, okay, tell me.
I would say that Post did put in that effort and that we believe pursuing it all in Post did nothing.
But why do we care about how much effort is put in, right? Let me try this differently, Tatiana. With the whale case, it was impossible to actually drag the whale to shore. You can't drag a whale to shore. But a fox is, you know, this big, however big, you put it in your hand, put it in your backpack, drag it to your farm. why shouldn't we require foxes, a small critter, that you actually get your hands on it? Hard. Yeah. Alex, let me try this one out. So your argument is he got pretty close, but didn't go all the way, right? So my question for you is this: how close must a hunter get to the fox in order to prevail under this labor theory? How close do you have to get? You didn't wound it. So if your argument's wounded, you lose. You didn't wound it. You didn't touch it. How close do you have? I'm not talking even touching. How close do you have to get to it? 5 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet, 50 feet. Foxes are fast. They can run. How close do you have to get, Alex?
Just in my opinion.
I'm asking you. You read the majority, you read the dissent. I'm asking you, how close do you have to get?
If it were me, I would say, what, within a distance of being able to reach it, like maybe 5 feet or something.
Within a distance of being able to reach it. What are you trying to say?
Like you're basically almost there.
So you're within swiping distance, maybe?
Yeah.
Amari, you want to take a step?
I would say maybe hunting with power with a gun, but then like distance of shooting it.
Okay, so within the difference in firing distance.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So you see the difficulty with labor theory, right? I just called on 5 people, and all very, very bright students couldn't give me a very good answer. And that's not your fault, right? It's a hard question to answer because there's no certainty. When you're talking about labor theory, how much labor is sufficient? How close do you have to get? You can see there's a lot of uncertainty with how courts can apply it. All right. Now let's turn to the majority, right? So Holden, you're the lawyer for the jerk, we'll just call him Pearson, right? And your guy just came along and swiped the fox after doing no work to get to it. What's your argument why you're actually winning?
I guess I would argue under the acquisition by capture ideology and say that since he was there and captured the fox and killed it, he would deserve it over Post having just chased it. Maybe if Post had like a mortal wound or something on the fox, he would have a better claim for it.
Now let me try and just push your theory. What if, Post shot the fox, not a mortal wound, but he shot the fox in the leg, and the fox kind of limping along, and you pick it up and run away with it. Do you win?
In my opinion, I don't think so.
If you're the lawyer for, you're the lawyer for the guy, right? You're the lawyer for the jerk. I'm changing the hypo, so you can't surrender the case, right? So I'll ask again, right? You're representing the jerk, and I'm just changing the facts a little bit. Post shot him in the leg. Fox kind of limping along, slows down, and then he's, oh wow, there's a fox kind of limping. Let me take it. Does rule of capture work there?
You could argue that it would because the fox's like liberty wasn't taken from it.
Oh, okay. So what's this liberty business? Tell me more.
In the reading, they were saying that basically if you take the fox's liberty away from it, which I got as a union, like,
Dead? Does that mean it has to be dead?
not dead, but it's close to it. Or
Mm. So Margaret, again, Post shoots the fox in the leg. The fox kind of limping along, and because the fox is slowed down, your guy picks it up and runs away with it. Roll capture. Is that right? The roll capture, he gets it, puts his hand on it.
You could be right. He has a bright line rule, so some judges are thinking about this.
But the difficulty then is, if that's a bright line rule, maybe the line shouldn't be so bright. In other words, is there some middle ground between all or nothing, right? If you're now positioned from the judge, you're a judge now. What sort of middle ground might you craft?
Like Holden said, I guess if you
I didn't say more. I just said you shot him in the leg and he was limping. I guess if a fox had shot, he eventually died, but this, the bullet grazed his leg and sort of limping along. He slows down. He can't run full speed. Okay. Is that okay, Hyman? Hyman, let me ask you another question. You said a trap. The farmer sets. I'm sorry. The hunter sets a trap, right? And the fox gets stuck in the trap. And then someone comes along and rips the fox out of the trap. Who gets it? The person who set the trap, or the person who actually captured the fox and removed it from the trap?
I think the person who set the trap says they took a substantial step to.
Ooh, good. I like that. Substantial step. What do you mean by substantial step?
Basically they took a um on obvious means to capture the fox, and I think it would be unfair to not give the fox to the person who took the time to set up the trap and bait as him in the
Good.
trap.
Good. Excellent. Thank you, Jaime. I appreciate that. All right. So I think all of you are giving me very, very strong answers, right? Labor theory is kind of hard to define. Rule of capture is also kind of hard to define. Because if you have too much of a bright line rule, it becomes incoherent, right? So you have the example of the trap. You have the example of the shooting in the leg. It's like, oh, that can't quite work. So there are problems with both theories. I think the majority dissent sort of, how do I say this? Downplay the difficulties with their own theories. They sort of say, oh, my theory is great, right? But there are difficulties with both. So actually, no, let me use question 3 for Jacob. So Jacob, we're in New York in 1805, right? What law governs? What law applies to animal hunts?
Well, I think in the majority opinion, Justice Thompson's reference that in all the cases that have come prior, which were mostly from England, there's only laws of occupancy and representing solely were those are English law.
Okay, so let me just pause here for a minute, Jacob. Okay, this is 1805 in New York. Was English law controlling in 1805 in New York? Why do you think I mean, you don't need to know much about American history, but why might English law not be very popular in the early 1800s back in New York? Yeah, we just fought a war of independence. And as part of the War of Independence, we rejected English law. So actually the court says something like, well, there are various English municipal statutes, but those don't govern us, right? And New York at the time did not enact any sort of statutes. So there's really no law from the England applying, and there's really no statutes from the New York government applying. Okay, Lisa, help us out here. So if there's no statutes, there's no precedence from courts, what do we rely on? You're sensing a pattern, right? I keep saying the same thing. The early cases in property, there's really no law, right? So Lisa, what on earth does the court look to if they can't look to statutes and precedents and other things that judges usually rely on?
In this case, they look back at philosophers.
Philosophers. Oh my goodness. Why on earth are judges citing these ancient, funny name philosophers like Grotius and Barbarac and Pufendorf? My goodness.
So there wasn't a lot of law to go around and those were people who introduced laws thousands of years ago.
Well, they didn't introduce laws. They just writers. These weren't government. Well, some of them were, but most of them were not government officials.
They introduced theories.
Very good. One more question, Lisa. I think you gave me a good answer. Let me give you a follow-up, please. Those people were writing at different times, right? The Romans lived in a very different time than they had in 1800 New York, right? Right. The philosophers from England and Germany and France from the medieval times, very different times than the 1800 New York. Why should philosophers from an ancient time provide the rule for, well, it's not modern, but the time it was modern, 1800 England, New York?
Even though
Okay, so Bailey, let me come to you for a second if I can. Were these philosophers just making, pardon the French, crap up? Were they just making crap up, or what were these philosophers writing based on?
Just life experience.
Well, that's good, life experience, right? How hunting functioned in their civilization, their society, right? And do you think these sort of hunting rules just emerge out of thin air, just pop up out of nowhere?
No.
What happened?
People, well, for one, I guess for the most part, there's no fast food and things like that. People
Yeah.
had to hunt to live a lot, and so people were frequently hunting more so than now, probably.
So you think the sorts of issues they were faced in Roman times are similar to the issues faced in modern society? So then, well, why do we care what the Romans thought?
Well, because we are hunters, and they hunted a lot.
Yeah. Is that Zach? Is that a question? Okay. So Zach, let me ask you the same question, right? Why do we care what the Romans thought about property? The Romans lived thousands of years ago, right? Who cares what the Emperor Justinian thought, right? These people are long dead. Why should we govern with the dead hand of the past?
I think the court, or at least the majority, is really just trying to find dividing precedents, and because you can't find it in English law, he just has to go back to.
But why couldn't the court just say, you know what? We don't have any precedents. Let's just adopt the rule we think is fair, right? And we think the fair rule is you have to get it to win. Or why can't the court just say that?
I think they could have. That's kind of what the consent was all about.
Oh, so all this stuff about Pufendorf and Barbarac was just for show?
No.
So then what's the point of these ancient writers from a civilization long ago dead?
I think it just gives context to the issue, like Mercedes said. I mean, obviously it's really old, but it came from somewhere, so it adds, some context to the issue.
So if there's, let me try to explain what you're getting at, Zach. If there's some idea that's been around for a long time, and people still study it, and they still learn about it, it probably has some merit, right? In other words, if we're still reading Justinian after 1,000 years, however long it's been, there might be a good reason why. So then, John, so the reason is, my follow-up question is, why do you think these sort of ancient principles keep relevant? That people don't say, well, screw that, it's old, let's just forget about it. Why do people keep studying old stuff? It's a hard question.
Because it works.
Oh, that's a good answer. It works. What do you mean it works?
Well, the rules have been here for so long, which means that people aren't rising up against it.
Oh, if there was a bad rule, do you think it would stick around for 1,000 years?
No.
What would happen to it?
It would be thrown out and new rules.
So if people keep studying and reviewing and sort of learning about something for 1,000 years, what does that suggest, John?
That's consistent.
And yeah, okay, very good. All right, very good discussion. It's actually very high level. I'm actually proud of you. Very good. Law students often hate, why are we governed by the rules of these long ago dead civilizations? They're not like us. They're Romans. They walk around in togas. I don't even know what they wore, right? Why do we care what the Romans did? I don't know, whatever, right? Why do we care what they thought? And the answer is, our society today didn't just pop up out of thin air, right? The rules and customs we have today are based on ancient principles from England, from Europe, probably from Denmark, I'm sure, right? From Rome, from Greece, from Egypt, right? We'll go back as far as you want. Roman law actually has a huge influence. The reading reference is Richard Epstein, who's a professor at Chicago. He thinks everything's Roman law. Just everything's Roman law. He's a genius, but everything from his Roman law. I don't know. That's not my area. Okay. We look at old stuff that's still relevant because it works. That was what John said a minute ago. I think that's actually a good answer, right? It works. If it didn't work, we wouldn't study it anymore, right? We'd stop reading it. So even though we live in a different society, we're not Romans, we're not, walking around in togas in the forum, whatever else, right? The rules still make sense. But society does change, right? Perhaps when Justinian wrote about hunting foxes, their concern was getting rid of pests, right? That these foxes would eat chickens and livestock and they would destroy the farms. So maybe you have one set of rules. But today it's this very aristocratic, elite sport, the hunting with the dogs and the hounds and the all this other nonsense, right? But still, the court says we have to cite something. To Zach's point, we can't just make crap up. We got to look at something. So, who do they look to? That's I said F. Frank. Yeah. No, you're fine. It's not your fault. It's Jacob's fault. So, Frank, what are some of the sources the majority relies on to base their opinion? Okay, so what's the Roman law say? Okay, very good, very good. All right, so under Roman law, they look at Justinian. Justinian was an emperor, and he wrote down what we call the Digest, this very thick book of various Roman laws, and people still to this day study it. And Justinian said, pursuit alone, right? Just pursuit alone is not sufficient to acquire a right to the animal. Justinian also said, even if you wounded, pursuit's not enough. So this is to, I think, Holden and Margaret's questions before, right? Wounding is not enough for Justinian. You need to actually take the animal. Everyone with me? And Henry de Bracton agrees, as does Fleda. Fleda was not actually a person. It's sort of this, we don't know who wrote it. It's actually kind of a mystery. But it was a very prominent medieval source. So Fleda and Bracton agree with Justinian. Then we get to one of my favorite names, Samuel von Pufendorf. I think of Hufflepuff, right? The Harry Potter books, right? He was a German jurist from the 17th century. Chloe, help us out. What did Pufendorf, and I swear you'll know their names. I'm sorry, I know they're silly, but just what did Pufendorf say here? Okay. What did you actually need for Pufendorf? Get it. Where you said, what did you actually have to have? I think, was it? Was he? Yeah, Brianna said before. Yeah, what's that word? Corporal, yeah. See, Brianna said it early today, corporal. You ever have corporal punishment? Corporal means body, like corpus, right? Habeas corpus, corpus Christi, right? The body. You need corporal possession, which means your hands on the animal, your hands on the fox. Okay? Wounding is not going to be enough. Another person, Cornelius van Binkershock, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, he's Dutch, had the same rule. Okay? So the court relies on Pufendorf, on Binkershock, on Justinian, on all these other ancient philosophers from 1,000 years earlier, or many hundreds of years, I can't count. And these philosophers establish a rule that mere pursuit alone is not sufficient. Instead, the fox belongs to Pearson, who intercepted and killed the fox. And he follows what we call the rule of capture. You have to physically have corporal touch. You need to physically the animal. All right? But that's not the end of the opinion, right? Judge Tompkins says there are some contrary principles. There's some other rules you have to acknowledge. This is what you call court distinguishing precedent, right? So to speak, it's like, well, most of the precedents are on my side, but there are some other precedents that we have to address. Is that Callie? Callie, what are the other principles that Judge Tompkins addresses? Barbarac. Okay, who's Barbarac? Very good. Okay, so we have this other authority. Now, there's a name that's not mentioned in this opinion, should be. Whose name is not mentioned here? Erin? Whose name really should be mentioned here is not mentioned? Who have we been talking about last two classes? Mr. John Locke. Is he mentioned anywhere in this case? No. John Locke is really the creator of the labor theory. He's not mentioned. Why? I've looked into this question many times. I don't have a good answer for you. I don't know why. But they cite Barbarac. And Barbarac was a follower of John Locke. So when you're reading Barbarac, you're basically citing Locke, right? So it's not Locke exactly. So when you see Barbarac, just think John Locke. That's just, just for your own sanity. Okay. So Barbarac was from France. And he says actual seizure is not always required to possess the animal. The chase might be enough. So Judge Tompkins goes out and says, well, if you wound the fox and you don't get it, that could be. So really, the court's disagreeing with Justinian, right? Justinian said wounding's not enough. Pufendorf said wounding's not enough. So the court actually takes a bit of a middle position, right, between Barbarac and Pufendorf, where the court says wounding might be sufficient. But here, is that Aaron? Is that Elizabeth? Did Post wound the animal here? Did he do anything to the animal? What does the majority say that you have to do? Somewhat, I can't hear you. I'm sorry. Okay, and then what's the effect? I think someone used this phrase earlier. What do you have to deprive the animal of? Yeah, that's it. Good. Natural liberty. So the court says you have to wound the animal in a way to deprive it of its natural liberty. Right? What that means, we don't know. But let me go back to my question to Holden and Margaret from some time ago. What if you shoot the animal in its leg? Elizabeth, I'll ask this for you. Shoot the animal in its leg, and you wound it. It starts like limping, but doesn't die. Have you deprived of its natural liberty?
I would say
What do you have to do to deprive of natural liberty?
definitely people would have to, I guess, I know, like, an easy explanation would be to trap it because it has no freedom.
So if you stop its movement altogether, if you slow it down, does that count? I think she's probably right. I don't actually have a good answer for you. I sort of ask questions I don't know the answer to. But the court doesn't really explain what that means. But you think of a mortal wound as it stopped dead in its tracks, right? It's not quite dead yet, but it can't go on. Think of the whale, right? You blow a hole in its side, it's not swimming anymore, right? It's going to just sink to the ocean's floor. Okay, very good. So it's possible, the court says, to acquire an animal by depriving of its natural liberty. Okay? But even then, right? Even then, there's some proof, right? The problem always with labor theory is you don't have a lot of proof. If you actually wounded it, you say, there's my bullet, right? There's my arrow, right? There's my trap. There's something that came from my body and restrained his movement in such a way to deprive him of his natural liberty. Everyone with me so far? All right, but none of this helps poor Post, because all he had was pursuit. All he had was pursuit. He just chased with his foxes, with his hounds. He did not take the actions necessary to occupy the fox. Therefore, he could not gain certain control of the animal. Everyone with me? Right, so Crespin, let me ask you this question. According to the majority, what would have given Post a fox? What could he have done to actually get the fox?
Wounded it or take away its natural liberty.
Okay, so give me an example. What could he have done?
Yes, shot it so it moved.
Yeah, right. And by shooting it, what is he then doing to Pearson, right? What's the act of shooting it do at that point?
Pearson, I guess it takes away Pearson's right. Pearson can't take away its natural liberty.
Yeah, you only do that once, right? Whatever natural liberty is, it can be deprived one time. Only one person can do it. right? If an animal's mortally wounded and then you shoot it again, it's like what's that phrase? You're kicking a dead horse, right? You can't kill you can't kill an animal twice. So there's only one taker, and then it would go to the first shooter who would post. All right. The last part of the majority opinion focuses on policy. I think someone, maybe Lisa or someone, mentioned that a few minutes ago. Wait, continue. Oh, James. James, what are the policy arguments the majority brings forward?
Uncertainty. You actually feel it, like you actually have possession of the animal.
Good. Why do you think it's an important policy concern? Well, actually, one question there. Why do you think the majority focus on which one's more certain? Why is it important to the majority?
Because they are deciding whose property it is.
What would have happened if the court went the other way, right? What would have happened if the court ruled for the jerk? What would that have done for? I'm sorry, if the court ruled for the hunter, right? I'm sorry. Okay. What if the court ruled for the hunter? What would that have done to litigation in New York?
It would have changed it substantially.
Change it how?
It would have set a precedent that.
Good. What would that precedent encourage people to do?
To really cheat the hunting system.
Well, they ruled for the jerk here. They ruled for the jerk. So, what would have ruling for the hunter have done here?
It would have made it to where, like, there's no threshold for possession, so to speak.
Max, what would ruling for the hunter here have done?
It would have set precedent that just pursuing animal.
Correct. And what would be the result of that precedent?
Anybody that claimed they were pursuing an animal could have.
Would there be more or less litigation in courts?
More.
Ah, so why do you think the court was actually pushing this sort of limited holding? What were they trying to do? Good. The court says ruling for the hunter here would create a fertile source of litigation. Fertile, it's a funny phrase, a fertile source of litigation, but look, this is tort reform, right? We're trying to reduce the amount of people going to court, right? We want an easy rule to apply. You have the fox, it's yours. We don't want courts wasting their time counting how many hours you were hunting and how many dogs you had, and how many hounds you had, right? So the court rules in favor of the jerk. And the court says, look, we know that Pearson was uncourteous and unkind. Isn't it just funny how they write that? That you've never seen that before, in opinion. Uncourteous and unkind. But the jerk won here. Pearson's act was productive of no injury or damage for which a legal remedy can be applied. Reverse the lower court, judgment for Pearson. All right, so I think we answered this question, number 4. The majority is far more concerned with certainty. And I think we've crossed elimination. The dissent focuses on fairness. Stephanie? So Stephanie, walk me through the dissent from Judge Livingston, please.
Yeah, so it basically states that everything is required with a pure integrity, or has reasonable prospect of taking the decision. And it's not necessary to actually kill it, but as long as they are within reach of the realistic and appropriate for its personal use, then that's what
Excellent. Very good. I think you gave me all my answers I was looking for. Very good. The dissent says physical capture is not required. Pursuit may be enough if you meet certain criteria. What's that phrase? How close you have to get? This I was asking a question. Was it someone else before? I can't remember who. Stephanie, how close do you have to get under the dissent's view to acquire the animal? What's that phrase they use? A reasonable prospect. A reasonable prospect. Camille, let me ask you. What's a reasonable prospect? of capturing the animal? What does that mean? Ah. Yeah, I asked someone this question before. What would that actually mean in the context of a fox hunt? What does a reasonable prospect look like? What would that look like with a fox hunt? So we're talking about distance. Okay. Do we know how close Mr. Post was in this case? Does that matter to the judge? Ah, so Cooper, what does this business of reasonable prospect even mean? The judge in the dissent rules for Post without even knowing how close he was. Is that problematic?
It seems to be, would maybe have something to do with the profession of the people.
Oh, good. Okay, that's good. Tell me more. I wasn't going there yet, but I can pivot. What do you mean by the profession?
So I mean, a hunter versus a farmer, reasonable prospect of doing something with the animal after.
Do you think there's a trust issue as well? We talked about this last week when I asked our last class. How do you know Gen actually killed the whale? You have no idea, right? But why do you think the court was trustworthy? Why was the court trustworthy of Gen? Do you think?
Maybe because he was willing to pay the legal costs.
No, honey, open hire lawyer. My goodness, hiring a lawyer does not make you trustworthy. You'll know that all too well. So that's funny, actually. Sorry, what's your name, sir, over here? Was it? Gabriel. Okay, Gabriel, if you just come in the office, I'll give you a name tag later, okay? So, Gabriel. Oh, is it over there? Oh, that's great. You know what? And there's a marker right here. So, Gabriel, today's your lucky day. But for later. Gabriel, let me ask you a question. Why do you think the court of the dissent was willing to believe Post here? There's nothing in the opinion about how close he was. Why do you think they trusted him? You know nothing about hound dog, right? Good spirits. All right, I'm just stalking. All right. But I think what you're getting at is he's part of the community, right? He's part of the hunting community, and that maybe gives him some credibility. All right. So I think what Cooper and Gabriel were getting at is that the dissent doesn't really know for sure how close they were, right? There were no smartphones, right? There's no iPhones. You couldn't take a picture of the fox. Oh, look, he's right over there. It's all he said, she said. But I think he's wanting to give the benefit out to the hunter with the hounds. Now, Matilda, let me ask you this question. Does the dissent think it's important to rely on Justinian and these ancient Roman emperors? Sure, yeah. Does the dissenting opinion, Judge Livingston, does he find it relevant what Justinian thought, what these emperors thought? Then why do you think the dissent doesn't really care what Justinian and the Romans thought? Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. The Romans lived 1,000 years ago, right? 2,000 years ago. They lived in a very different time, and they lived in a very different circumstance. And I think what the dissent says is the reasons for hunting foxes today are different than the reasons for killing foxes 2,000 years ago. So he doesn't really care what the Romans thought, right? In fact, he says, we should be able to establish a rule for ourselves, right? We're a new nation. We're a new country. Why can't we make up our own rules? Why are we governed by the dead hand of the ancient Romans? Now, Astrid, do you think Judge Livingston really wanted to decide this case himself? Do you think this was even a case for the court to decide? The legislature? Or else, this is a dispute. Who else could resolve this dispute instead of the courts? Let me ask the question differently. How are conflicts between hunters usually resolved? Right, two people hunting, they get some conflict. How do you usually resolve this? By themselves. Yeah, exactly right. He says, why can't we just submit this case to hunters, right? Let the hunters deal with this themselves. Why are you wasting the time of the Supreme Court of the state with the stupid fox dispute, right? This is a waste of our time. You've let it submit to the arbitration of the sportsman. But the case before him, he has to make some decision, right? And the rule he adopts is you can acquire an animal without mancupation. Is a funny word. Mancupation. 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 What the heck is mancupation? Well, think of like mano, man, hand, right? Physical touch, right? You don't need physical touch. The dissent adopts the labor theory of property. If you invest your time, your energy, and your efforts, you can obtain the fox. And here, the dissent favors Barbarac. And again, I think Stephanie gave this test a minute ago. You have to be within reach of the fox, within reach. Does that mean reach of your arm? My arm is about 2 feet long. It's not clear if that's what it means. Is it the range of your bullet? We don't know. We must have a reasonable prospect of acquiring the animal. Okay? So the majority creates this sort of bright line rule. And the dissent uses this very open-ended test that's not so clear. All right? Now, I want to go back to the first polling question. Where is this? Here it is. Did anyone change their mind after reading the opinion? That you maybe flipped your position from the majority to dissent? Oh, yeah. That's B, Ben. So you changed your mind? So what did you go from start to finish?
Originally I was siding with, I guess, the dissent was when I first was majority, I kind of agreed that like there's no value in there. There's no need to really even get involved in the conflict. But after reading the dissent, I kept coming back to the same decision that they made with Dan in terms of you want to protect the custom of hunting, and you don't want people to just say, well, what's the point of even going after it if someone can swoop in at the last second?
So the dissent persuaded you. Yeah. Did anyone else change your mind, at least during the class today? Yeah, Mark.
I looked at the other way.
Oh, interesting. Okay, tell us.
I thought that because the dissent was going to protect the lock theory, originally thought it was a better idea because after you could get it. But then I understood like the corporal had a bit necessary to
So you started with lock theory, and you realized the lock theory is kind of problematic. It's very hard to follow. Anyone else flip their opinion during class? This is a hard case. I swear, I teach this case, every year for I don't know how many years, and I don't know the right answer. I go back and forth. I truly do. You'll see the judges in this semester struggle back and forth with these sorts of issues. There's no right answer for these issues. There's no majority. Oh God, Josh, what's the majority rule? Doesn't work like that yet, right? These are very hard questions. All righty. Any other disputes on Pearson? Okay. Yes, Brianne. Wait, how many Briannas do we have in this class? 3?
Two Briannas and one Brianna.
Okay, so you are
Brianna.
Brianna. Okay, I can do that. Yeah, go ahead, Brianna.
So, for the label, let's say that two people are in pursuit.
Yeah.
Of the same animal, then how would they decide who gets the animal?
Oh, what a good question. So if you didn't hear, I'll repeat it. So 2 people are in pursuit of the fox, and they're both neck and neck, right? How do they decide who gets it, right? Well, let me ask you a dumb follow-up question. If the fox is never caught, then no one gets it. Are you saying that, in other words, how would anyone ever claim the fox is neither and gets it, right? This fox is like, Wile E. Coyote just runs away and, no one ever gets it. I think someone has to get to it eventually, right? Because the actual cause of action is for the body, the chattel, right, the thing, and someone has the fur. I think someone has to get it. But I think the better question, let's say it's 3-way, right? You have 2 people chasing it neck and neck, and then it jerks 2 people last minute, and all 3 of them are litigate against each other. That's a harder case. Right? How do you prove which hunter is actually more instrumental? Maybe you just split the value of the horse, the fox, 2 ways, like in the baseball case. Good question. Right. Anything else in the fox case? Yeah, Will.
So when you talk about mortal wounding, let's say you like shoot the fox in the leg, and it's like, yeah, it's one thing, but it's not done immediately, but like it leads to a death in like a week or so. Like, would that be considered mortal wounding, or is it like a cutout?
Look, it's actually a very hard question. Mortal wounding refers to something that will kill the animal. What if it bleeds out of the course of a day? Maybe because it was shot and injured, it couldn't eat and it couldn't like forage for food, and then it dies of starvation, right? Or maybe you shoot it and it's slowed down and a predator kills it, right? A mountain lion or something, right? So it's very hard to prove how animals actually die. So there's really not a good answer to your question. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, Alex. Now you're writing a law school fact pattern. Yeah, the dogs. Let me just spin out your hypo a bit. What if you let your dogs out and your dog kills the fox? Is that fit bodily touch? Is that in other words, is the dog your agent, so to speak, that he's extending your arms? Was it respondi at Barkior? I mean, what do we have? A couple of you got that. Right. I mean, I think the dog, if it's actually your trained hound, would be your agent, so to speak. And that's why they make a big deal about the hounds. Yeah, I don't know. Good question, though. Reach. I mean, think the hound is basically like a gun. It's a weapon of your choice. It's a trained weapon. I think that's why the court says these are not beagles. These are hounds. These are actually trained, trained hunting dogs, whatever that means. Do the hounds actually like capture the fox? I don't even know. Anyone know? They sort of bark and tell you where the fox is. I don't know. Yeah. House.
Usually, for things like for fox hunting and other kind of animals like that, the dogs will be used to kind of chase and corner the fox so the fox can't escape. It allows the hunter to kill the user.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I don't know, but I'll take your word for it. Yeah, I don't know hunting. I'm sorry. Never been hunting. Justice Scalia took Justice Kagan hunting, and she'd never been before. She enjoyed it, but had not been yet. All right. Anything else? All right. Let's go into the weird case, right? So, I was like, all right, why on earth am I assigning this case? I think very often in law school, you sort of get bogged down in the law you're studying, and you sort of lose the big picture. This case, the Splunky Explorer case, is a way to sort of reflect on the big picture. It reflects different ways of deciding cases, and I hope to at least show you in the next 30 minutes or so how the opinion in this case will map onto Pearson, right? How the judges in Pearson reflect on the same considerations we have here. But you also see, as you say, law school, these sorts of issues recur over and over again. So trust me on this one. So Didi, you want to just describe for us the fact what happened in this one team case? This is not real, right? This is fictional. It's fake. It's never happened. It's kind of based on a true story, but this never happened. You want to give us the facts what happened here? Good. The hikers are trapped inside a cave. What happened? Okay, landslide. Good.
Yeah, somebody they asked they were able to realize they eat one another.
Yeah, and just they have no food, they have no water, they have no supplies. Okay, so they call on the radios and they ask the doctor, will we survive beyond 20 days? Right? Yeah. What if we eat each other? Yeah, you'll survive. Okay, then what happens next?
Then they decided to roll dice.
Roll dice, cast a lot.
And then eat
85 more. Yeah, he was the unlucky guy, right?
Yeah.
But look, whose idea was it to roll the dice in the first place? All right, so I guess it comes back to karma, right? Karma's a bitch, as they say, right? So he had this idea to roll the dice, and at the last minute, did he give you have second thoughts? Did he maybe say maybe we shouldn't do this? Is a bad idea? So he tried to back out of it. Like, no, you're not backing out. He rolled the dice at the lowest number, whatever, and then they ate it. Gross, right? This is based loosely on the Dudley Moore case. You probably read this in Crim, now with the shipwreck. There's a famous criminal case. You know this one? Maria, tell us, what about the Dudley Moore case?
what's something about group of people on a boat.
Good, yeah.
And I think it was a storm.
Yes,
And then there were 3 or 4 people and one of them was a younger boy and he was sick and then they decided to put him in.
They put a knife in his throat and he slit his throat. Yeah, so exactly right. So you had people on a lifeboat at sea and they were basically trapped. They had no food, they had no water. And then they basically decided to kill one of the other guys. And they ate his body. They ate every aspect of him. And then they were rescued. And when they came back to the country, they're like, where's the other guy? Like, well, we ate him. Gross, right? But true. And they were actually tried for murder. This is called Regina, or the Queen, versus Dudley Moore. So I guess you read this in your studies? Excellent. Good. Perfect. All right. So it's not a true story, but it's sort of loosely based on a real fact. Okay. So James, what happens after they eventually clear all the rubble, they clear all the rock, and they get him out of the cave?
So they get him out, they bring him to the hospital, and then shortly after they charge him with murder.
Okay, so just the decision to charge with murder, was the prosecutor required to charge them? Why do you think he charged them with murder? They just lived through this awful scenario. God, no one ever wants to do this.
Well, they get into a lot. They were guilty of murder, but just on the situation of it, it's somewhat understood in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was just his personal decision to charge him with murder, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's not in the case, but I just want to focus on this point for a bit. When you're talking about courts, why the court do this? Why the court do that? Someone has to bring the case in the first place, right? There's no requirement for a prosecutor to bring this charge. I mean, maybe there is in the jurisdiction, the fictional jurisdiction, New York, whatever, but there's no requirement. All right. Did I skip this row? Yeah, I did. Okay, I can't believe that. Sorry. If I do that, just remind me. I sometimes, did I skip that row also? The 4 of you? No, I did you guys last time. Okay, so it's okay, I'm doing that. So Kendall, if 1 year, I have 2 students here. I kept skip them. Be like, your favoritism? No, I swear it's not favorite. It's just there's a lot going on. So Kendall, let me ask you this question, please. If you were the prosecutor, would you have brought this case? You're the district attorney. You bring this case? Why not?
Because everybody would disagree.
Oh my goodness! So if you're the DA, you don't bring an unpopular case? Is that the standard? You have discretion to bring it. Why do you bring this case?
I probably would bring it because if they know the case to themselves.
Well, they got a conviction. Though the law seems to be on the side of the government. You're uncomfortable with this question, aren't you? I can tell. I can't see your face, but I can tell you these are you're screaming. Abby, would you brought this case if you were the district attorney?
Possibly.
Possibly. Okay, tell me more.
Although it would be against public opinion, I think, but just to get retribution for Wetmore's family.
Yeah, they ate his uncle, right? They ate his father or
Yeah.
his brother. They ate him alive. Guys went for a hike in the cave. Just curious. I don't have this on the board, but just polling. Would you have brought this case? A is yes, B is no. I just curious people are. I always like to ask. I forgot. I'll put the polling for next class. So again, A, you would have brought it. B, you would not bring it. Okay. I'll make this question. A. Would you have brought this prosecution? There. Sorry, I should put this early. It just occurred to me. All right, I think I just put everyone here. I'm going to stop it. Oh, wow. That's pretty damn close. That's really actually slightly more no than yes, but that's really close. Again, I think this is a hard case. I don't presume to tell you what the right answer is, but that's really close. See what the other class puts in. All right, so let's actually walk through. Come back to is it Sreesh? Oh, here, just use a marker. That's kind of hard for me to read. Whoever has a marker, just send it later. All right, Sreesh. So there are five judges on this court, right? Let's start the first one, Justice Truepenny, Chief Justice Truepenny. What's his argument here?
So he doesn't like his argument is honestly pretty straightforward. He gives us the statute and he makes it clear that the statute is pretty straightforward. There's not really a whole lot of room for any variation. But then he does say that he thinks there would be some kind of a miscarriage of justice to convict these people. So his idea is that they should rely on the executive and follow in the footsteps of the trial court and write to the executive. Like they should convict the defendants and then write to the executive and ask that their sentences be commuted.
Why? I'll come back to the part about the executive. That'll be from Maddie in a minute. But let me just start with the law. Why is this case is so simple? Why is it such an easy case for him?
Because the law literally says whoever shall willfully take the life of another shall be punished by that. So
And this is willfully taking the life of Wetmore, right?
Yeah.
So he's not keeping any sort of flexibility to the law.
Yeah, and I mean, to his credit, I don't think the law, the way it's written, is designed to get any flexibility.
All right. So Maddie, let me ask you this other part, right? So the judge is like, well, the law sucks, right? It leads to an unjust result. Let's write a letter to the president, the executive, to see if we give a pardon for the defendants. What was your reaction to that when you read that?
I kind of agreed. Like I was erring more on the side of that, like these people were in kind of situation that not many people would find themselves in, so I could see why a pardon would make sense.
Have you ever seen a case where a judge says to a president or governor, you really should issue a pardon here? You ever see if you're in law school one semester, but you ever heard of something like that?
Yeah, like in criminal cases, like Snowden, I think they're trying to get.
But did the judge ask for a pardon?
Yeah, I guess for the judge specifically.
Yeah, that's kind of weird, isn't it? And I think the other judges criticize him for this, but it's sort of like a separation of powers issue, right? Why is a judge begging for clemency, begging for pardon? Is that the judge is supposed to be neutral, right? A judge is supposed to even concern themselves with this sort of fairness. All right, so now why is this Truepenny approach relevant? Well, I think we've already seen cases where the court doesn't like its ruling in Pearson, right? The majority says, look, Pearson was a jerk. Equities are not on his side. But I'm going to follow the law anyway and give the fox to the jerk. Then we have a case like pop up against Hayashi where it's obvious Hayashi had the ball. And the judge's like, yeah, but it's not fair because the other guy got beat up, so let me just chop the ball in half. So you often see judges with this sort of conflict, right? Where the law seems to go one way, but their heart goes the other way. How do they handle it? Right? Some judges say, you know what, screw it, I don't like the result, but I'm going to rule this way anyway. Or the judge in the baseball case is like, well, I'll just use equity to smooth things over. And here, Truepenny, the Chief Justice, says, Well, I don't like the result, but let me publicly, in my opinion, ask the executive to give a pardon. Very unusual, but he's sort of trying to use the power of his office to reach the result he thinks is just, even if the law doesn't support it. All right. One, I'll just leave with this thought on true penny. Very often in law school, not in this class much, in other classes, there are cases that are very divisive where people sort of fall along political lines. And one way to sort of check yourself is to say, if I were in the ballot, right? If I was in the voting booth, how would I vote on this case? Okay. And what do I think the law is? And if your political preferences always line up with your legal preferences, you're probably affected, right? Your politics affects your law. But if you say, man, I favor the law this way, but oh God, my policy goes the other way, that's actually a good sign. When your policy preferences diverge from your legal preferences, that means that you're actually a rational person. You're trying to think things through objectively. And that's just one way to check yourself, right? It's like, if I was voting for this issue as a member of Congress, how would I vote? If I was a district attorney, question I get to Kendall made her wince, right? How would you vote? Versus I'm a judge. I'm a neutral arbiter. How am I deciding the case? And just keep that in mind. It'll just sort of linger in your head. But politics always lines up with your law. Then you might have just to reevaluate things. Okay. All right. So that's first one. Chief Justice True Penny. Then we have come back to Zara. Sorry, I did it. Oh no, yeah. All right, so I did a detour. If I ever forget a road, just sort of nudge me. I'll remember. Zara, let me ask this question, please. Judge Foster has two opinions, right? Basically, different arguments. What's his first argument? It's kind of weird, but relevant.
He says that he believes that it's all because the law of common law was established on foundation where men were part of a civilized society, and this situation placed him in an area that was not a civilized society, so his laws can't stand in this context.
Oh my goodness! So the laws of this jurisdiction do not extend to the cave. You got to walk into that. How can that possibly be right?
He says that it's because the intention of the laws when they were created for a society where these men were not pushed to a point of desperation for nutrients.
Yeah, very good. So thank you, Sarah. Very good. So we've talked before about the state of nature idea, right? This sort of social compact, that when people were in this prehistoric state of nature, which never actually happened, but just imagine it happened for a moment. And they came together, they formed an agreement, right? And they form an agreement that fits their circumstances. And then we build the civil society. The civil society we have is premised on government coming together, making an agreement. But when they were in this cave and they were trapped, they were beyond the reach of our law. What they say, they're beyond the reach of our service of process, right? You couldn't serve process in a cave, right? Even though they're in the jurisdiction, they're beyond the reach of our laws. So, Monica, let me ask this question. If they're beyond the reach of our laws, the law of the murder statute, what law governs them, according to Foster?
The law of nature.
What is the law of nature?
Basically, survival of the fittest, that's what they have to do to survive.
And what agreement did they put together themselves?
To eat wet and
Well, it wasn't random. Well, actually, it was random. They had an agreement. What was the agreement? So that was their law, right? The murder statute wasn't their law. Their law was this agreement they made among the five of them to roll dice. Is that kind of it's like a shocking idea, but it's not crazy when you think about it, right? The idea is our laws don't govern them. The law that governs them was their custom, their usage. Oh, you see it now, right? Among themselves, they developed a custom. Now, they made it up in 5 seconds, but this was their custom. This was their usage. You're stuck in a cave. You're about to die. We're going to roll a dice. So it's not completely arbitrary. It's kind of random, but it's not like we're just going to kill the weakest person. It's whoever rolls the lowest number. Man, the highest stakes game of craps ever, right? It's true. All right. The obvious reference here is, again, to the whale case, right? To the duck case, to the fox case. What is their custom? But the obvious difference here is there's an actual statute saying we don't really care about your custom. If you murder someone, it's death, right? It's execution. All right, so that's Foster part uno, part one. And then he says, forget everything I just wrote. Let's go to another rationale, right? And then we got Foster part two. Tim, what's the Foster part two, please?
Is that where he talks about self-defense?
Yeah, talk about self-defense. Good.
Yeah, it says that the law that you cannot murder anybody, there are some exceptions when you look at it. You came up with self-defense,
Good.
which acquitted people in the past. So
Yeah.
why can't we create something similar?
Yeah, in other words, we've had this murder statute for a long time. We've always recognized the defense of self-defense, right? Right? We're not violating the literal wording of the statute, right? So we're looking into the spirit of the statute, what the purpose of the statute is. And you see a lot of judges do this very often, right? They'll say, well, the statute says this, but the legislature would not have intended to reach this result, right? If you ask the members of the legislature, would you have intended to criminalize the cave murders? They say, no, of course not. So they basically add an exception to the law similar to self-defense based on the spirit of the law. Okay. Then we get to Judge Tating, Brock. This is perhaps the weirdest of all the opinions. You ever seen something like this before? You kind of surprised you read this? So what did Judge Tating say?
Basically criticized us and said that the self-defense should apply to say when Corporal had a pistol and when they were about to beat up his shot them,
Yeah.
and they were going to act for necessity, the self-defense would apply there.
Right. So how does Tating then cast his vote?
He withdraws.
What the heck does that mean? He withdraws. He just gives up.
He just removed himself from the case.
How do you do that as a judge? Can you do that?
I didn't think so.
No, I think it's all right. Right. So you just sort of, I don't know. Shrugs. Yeah. Shrugs. And this is a 5-member court, right?
Yeah.
And they're evenly divided, right?
Yeah.
So what's the consequence of this guy withdrawing?
The conviction stands.
You affirm the conviction. Yeah, when the court's evenly divided, they affirm the lower court. That's the rule. The rule everywhere, not just in fake land. Actually, that's the real rule. So, I mean, I think here, almost like Judge Livingston's like, why do we have to even decide this case? This is not for us to decide. This is too damn hard. We're just going to give up. All right. But he does offer criticism saying, how do you have Foster saying that there's no law? Of course there's law, right? They're in our jurisdiction. All right. Then we go on to Judge Keene, right? Tyler, what does Judge Keene say? Who do you rule for? Yeah. Against murder? No, Keene. No, Keene. Okay, so again, what did Keene say?
That moral considerations are relevant basically in applying the statute.
All right, good. So Keene would affirm the conviction straight up. He said we shouldn't be signaling to the executive, right? Again, I think this is kind of like the appears to be post majority, right? It doesn't really matter what we think, good or bad, or the rule where the law goes. Then we get to the last opinion, right? It's a Judge Handy. This also one's kind of strange. Kyle, what does Judge Handy say? But why? What does he base his ruling on? And how does he know what public opinion is? But what's he looking to? Just sticking his finger in the air? Into the liberals? No, John? How does he know what public opinion is? What's he looking to? You have any notes? Ryan?
Then was there something about like newspaper and public?
There are polls in newspapers. John, you remember what this poll said? Remember, I can't hear you. fine. There were polls in the newspapers. And the polls show overwhelmingly that this was unpopular. What did Kendall say a few minutes ago? This was unpopular? So we actually do have some support for that, right? That there are unpopular polls. And then he says, this is the craziest part. My niece or something knows the governor, and he's like, it's like my cousin's sister's boyfriend's nephew, right? Knows the governor and says he's not going to give a pardon, right? This is the craziest judgment. But let me tell you, was it so crazy when the court said, let's look to the custom of the fishermen? Was it so crazy when the judge said, let's look to the custom of the hunters? Judges often look to custom. What makes this so glaringly obvious is he's actually looking at a poll. But what is a poll but a measurement of custom? Right? A poll is just basically a measurement, scientifically backed, of public perception of an issue. So I know it looks crazy, but you've just read 3 or 4 cases that did the exact same thing. Judges often look at popular opinion. What makes it so blatant is they have an actual poll in the newspaper. All right. So we know now the case goes 4-4. I'm sorry, 2-2 with 1 withdrawal. So there's no majority opinion. Convictions affirmed. Executed. I want to do a poll if I can. This is question number 8. Which one did you guys all agree with? And I know Foster, there's 2 opinions. I can't make an option F. It'll break the computer. So just sort of pick either of the Fosters. Which one did you agree with? Okay. Another 5 seconds or so. Okay, let me stop it right over here. So we got, wow. Not many for Judge Tating, who just withdrew. I got that one. Judge Foster. Wow, a lot of you like the self-defense exception or the state of nature. Not many for Judge Keene. This would be the sort of hard-ass approach. And look at that. A quarter of you favor Judge Handy with the public opinion polling. That's fascinating. Guys, we're not done. You got a minute left. We pack up when I say we're done. Thanks. All right, so let me wrap up and just summarize for a bit. We have, from last classes, we had discovery, we have conquest. Today we have rule of capture, right? And the rule of capture can be done in many ways. It can require corporal possession. It could require mortal wounding. It could require, under the labor approach, having a reasonable prospect of capturing it. This is why I'm telling you the rule of capture is not a simple idea. It doesn't reduce to just one sentence. But I want you to keep in mind the sort of Spelunky and Explorer model. Right? These are different judges who have decided different cases in different ways over the years. And you'll see these sort of patterns of judging approach over and over again. And I'm curious to see if this sort of breakdown here affects how you approach cases in other contexts. I have no idea, but it's really fun to watch. Anything else? All right, I'll be here. I'll be at my office in a few minutes, 6:23. If you have any questions, thank you so much.